So here's what just happened. Right now, as you are watching this, the entire framework of US-Iran diplomacy has just been torched to the ground. And I mean that literally. Within the last few hours, senior officials in Tehran have come out publicly, forcefully, and with zero ambiguity to call Donald Trump's so-called nuclear negotiation offer exactly what they believe it is: a staged performance, a fake, a PR stunt. This is not a routine statement. This is not a bureaucratic press release. This is Iran's top leadership looking directly at Washington, D.C. and saying, "We see through you and we are done playing your game." The response from Tehran just broke, and it is sending shockwaves through every foreign ministry, every intelligence agency, and every war room from Washington to Tel Aviv to Moscow. Right now, in this moment, the world just got measurably more dangerous. Stay with me, because what just unfolded in the last 24 hours is not just a diplomatic story. It is a breaking flashpoint, and it changes everything that comes next. Here is the hard truth, and this is something most mainstream coverage is completely missing right now. This is not just Iran rejecting a negotiation offer. This is a complete reshaping of the entire Middle East security architecture. What just happened in Tehran is the formal public declaration that the era of back-channel diplomacy between Washington and Iran is over, done, finished. For years, through administrations, through sanctions, through strikes and proxy conflicts, there was always a quiet understanding that the door was never fully closed. There was always a thread, a phone call, a Swiss intermediary, a secret meeting in Oman. That thread just snapped. Iran has not just rejected Trump's offer. Iran has publicly humiliated it. They have named it as theater, and in doing so, they have eliminated any face-saving path back to the table. This is not a negotiating tactic. This is a closing statement. And when Iran closes doors like this, history has taught us they mean it. The war for the Middle East just entered what Iranian commanders themselves are now calling its final phase. And that phrase, right now, should scare every single one of us. Let's break down exactly what happened, step by step, because the details matter. It started 2 weeks ago when the Trump administration, through what officials called back-channel diplomacy, sent a message to Tehran. The message reportedly outlined a proposal. Iran freezes its nuclear enrichment at current levels, agrees to IAEA inspections, and in return the United States would ease a portion of the crippling economic sanctions that have been bleeding the Iranian economy dry for years. On the surface, that sounds like movement. It sounds like diplomacy. The White House briefed select journalists. Allies were quietly notified. The optics were designed to make Trump look like the deal maker, the closer, the guy who could do what Obama and Biden couldn't. But here's what happened next. Iran's foreign minister, speaking in a nationally televised address, didn't just decline the offer. He dissected it. He called the proposal, and I want you to hear this, quote, "a theatrical gesture designed for American domestic consumption, with no genuine commitment to justice or sovereignty." That's diplomatic language for, "You're lying, and we know it." Then, within hours, Iran's supreme leader released a statement rare for this type of direct public communication, describing any negotiations under what he called the current U.S. pressure and threat framework as, quote, "worthless and humiliating." And then this is the part that should make your stomach drop. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's most powerful military force, issued a separate statement. They did not talk about diplomacy. They talked about readiness, military readiness, strategic positioning. They used the words, "final phase of resistance." 3 separate statements, 1 foreign minister, 1 supreme leader, 1 military command, all within 48 hours, all saying the same thing in different ways. The window is closed. What comes next is something else entirely. Now let's talk about the players, because this story has a clear architecture of power and understanding. Who's winning and who's panicking right now is critical. On one side, Tehran, calculating, patient, strategic. Iran's leadership has been preparing for this moment for 30 years. They are not surprised by Trump's offer. They were expecting it. In fact, multiple Iranian analysts speaking right now on state television are saying this response was scripted weeks ago. Tehran watched Trump's first term. They watched the JPOA withdrawal. They watched the maximum pressure campaign. They watched the assassination of General Soleimani, and they drew one conclusion: America's offers come with hidden knives. This is a regime that has survived the Shah, the Iraq War, 8 years of brutal sanctions, a COVID catastrophe, and internal protests. They are not fragile. They are patient. And right now, they are playing from a position they believe is stronger than at any point in the last 2 decades. Their nuclear program is more advanced than it has ever been. Their proxy network from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen to militias in Iraq and Syria is more active than ever. They have deepened military ties with Russia and China, and they know with 2026 elections looming, that time may actually be on their side. On the other side, Washington reactive, divided, desperate for a win. The Trump administration needed this negotiation to work not for geopolitical stability, but for domestic optics. A nuclear deal, even a partial one, would have been a headline victory. Trump does what Biden couldn't. It would have been wall-to-wall coverage, a signature foreign policy moment. Instead, they got publicly embarrassed by Iran on live television, broadcast to the entire world. And now Washington is scrambling right now as we speak. Sources inside the State Department and the National Security Council are reportedly in emergency discussions because Iran didn't just say no. Iran said no in a way that makes the U.S. look weak, naive, manipulable. And in the Middle East, looking weak is never just an embarrassment. It is an invitation. But here's where it gets serious, really serious. Because if this were just about a failed diplomatic pitch, a routine rejection in the long, grinding history of U.S.-Iran relations, we would file this under expected and move on. Diplomacy fails all the time. Countries posture, leaders talk tough, and then usually someone blinks. But something is fundamentally different this time. And this is the part nobody is talking about. Iran is not negotiating from a position of desperation. They're not. Their economy is hurting, yes, but their strategic position is the strongest it has been in a generation. Here's why that matters right now. Iran's nuclear enrichment program, according to the latest IAEA reports, has reached 60% purity, a level that has no civilian application. None. That is weapons-grade material in waiting. The only step between 60% and a functional weapon is a matter of weeks, not years. The nuclear threshold that the entire global non-proliferation framework was designed to prevent. Iran is standing right on its edge right now as we speak. This is where everything changes. Because when Iran publicly rejects negotiations and simultaneously sits at the doorstep of nuclear capability, that combination creates a tripwire for Israel, for Saudi Arabia, for the entire U.S. military posture in the Gulf. Think about what just happened in the last 72 hours alone. Israeli Prime Minister's office has put out a statement not publicly available yet, but reported by two separate Israeli outlets, that says Israel is in active consultation about military options. The USS Harry S. Truman carrier strike group, which was heading toward the Red Sea, has changed course. Pentagon officials confirmed the repositioning but refused to explain it on record. And here's the escalation that should terrify every analyst watching. China and Russia have just issued a joint statement calling on the United States to refrain from, and I'm paraphrasing, any unilateral military adventurism in the Persian Gulf region. That statement was released within 6 hours of Iran's rejection. 6 hours. That is not coincidence. That is coordination. Russia and China saw this coming. They were briefed. They are positioned. And they are signaling right now, in this moment, that any U.S. military strike on Iran will not be a unipolar action. It will be contested diplomatically, economically, and potentially militarily. Do you understand what that means? We are not talking about a contained Middle Eastern conflict anymore. We are talking about a potential superpower flashpoint, a confrontation that could involve the three largest military powers on Earth. And this is the part nobody is talking about in the mainstream press. The U.S. response options right now are all bad. Strike Iran militarily, risk a regional war and a superpower confrontation, do nothing, appear completely impotent, and green-light Iran's nuclear timeline. Try diplomacy again. Iran has just publicly torched the credibility of that path. There is no clean exit. And right now, inside the White House, they know it. Now let's talk about what this actually means for real people, for your wallet, your job, your daily life. Because I know this feels like distant geopolitics, but it isn't. Not anymore. Oil. Let's start there. The Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day, sits at the edge of Iranian territorial waters. Iran has threatened multiple times explicitly that if it is attacked, the strait gets closed, not disrupted. Closed. What happens to global oil prices if 20% of supply disappears overnight? Analysts at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan have already run that scenario. Their estimates. Oil hits $150 to $180 per barrel within weeks. And when oil goes to $180 per barrel, everything you buy, everything you eat, everywhere you drive goes up with it. Global shipping costs are already spiking right now. Cargo insurance rates for vessels passing through the Gulf have jumped 340% in the last 6 months. Companies are already rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to delivery times, adding billions to costs. Those costs get passed to you, tech and semiconductors. Iran's relationship with China means sanctions pressure on Beijing-based chipmakers will intensify that hits everything from your smartphone to your car to your appliances. Supply chains that were just beginning to stabilize after COVID are about to take another hit. The stock market is already reacting. Defense stocks Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman are surging in after hours trading right now. Energy stocks are moving. And if you follow the money, the real money, the institutional money, it is already pricing in military escalation within the next 90 days. That should tell you everything. And for everyday Americans, gas prices, food prices, mortgage rates that stay elevated because the Federal Reserve cannot cut into an inflationary oil shock. Every single person watching this will feel this conflict in their pocket, whether they follow geopolitics or not. Let that sink in for a moment. Iran, a nation under the most severe economic sanctions in modern history, just publicly humiliated the President of the United States on the world stage and walked away from the table voluntarily. Let that sink in. This proves something much bigger. This is not about nuclear talks. This never was. This is about who holds leverage. And right now, as uncomfortable as this is to say, Iran believes it does. They believe that the cost of their nuclear program has already been paid, that the sanctions have done their worst, that their proxies are dug in, that their allies in Moscow and Beijing have their backs. What this really means is that the United States is no longer the uncontested architect of Middle Eastern security. The era of American primacy in the Gulf, that era that began in 1991 with Desert Storm and was cemented after 9/11, is genuinely, visibly cracking. Think about that. This is not just a failed negotiation. This is a signal from Tehran to every smaller nation watching. Resistance works, patience works, and America's reach has limits. This moment right here, right now, will be studied in foreign policy classrooms for a generation, and we are living through it in real time. Now zoom out, because the world watching this is not passive. Every capital on earth is reading Tehran's statement right now and drawing its own conclusions. Saudi Arabia, which has spent the last year cautiously normalizing with Iran through Chinese mediation, is in a genuinely impossible position. They need U.S. security guarantees. But if those guarantees look hollow, the Saudi royal family has very clear incentives to go nuclear themselves, and they've said so explicitly in the past. A Saudi nuclear program would trigger Egypt, Turkey, potentially the way. The Middle East would become the most nuclear-armed region on Earth within a decade. Israel is the most dangerous flashpoint right now. The Israeli government has an absolute red line on Iranian nuclear capability. Absolute. They have struck Iraq's Asyric reactor in 1981. They struck Syria's Al-Kibr facility in 2007. They have conducted operations inside Iran itself, Stuxnet, targeted assassinations. Facility sabotage. An Iran on the edge of nuclear breakout combined with a U.S. that looks unable to deliver diplomacy is the precise scenario that triggers Israeli unilateral military action. And if Israel strikes Iran, even if the U.S. does not actively participate, Iran will retaliate against American assets. Every base in Iraq, every carrier in the Gulf, every diplomat in the region is a target. The U.S. gets pulled in regardless. Europe is watching this with barely concealed horror. Germany, France, the UK, the three European powers that negotiated the original JPOA, are scrambling to revive any diplomatic track. They understand better than Washington right now that a Middle East war is not a distant problem for Europeans. It is an energy crisis, a refugee wave, a recession trigger. Right now, European foreign ministers are on emergency calls that are happening as we speak. And China? China is the quiet winner of all of this. Every day that the U.S. is consumed by Middle East escalation is a day America is not focused on the South China Sea, on Taiwan, on the Pacific theater where China's real strategic ambitions lie. Beijing is watching this unfold with cold, careful satisfaction. This is just the beginning. Let me tell you what the next 60 to 90 days likely look like, because the road ahead is not murky. The trajectory is already set. What happens next will define the entire second term of Trump's presidency. Here's the choice the White House faces. They can double down on economic pressure, new sanctions, new designations, hoping Iran blinks before the nuclear program crosses the final threshold. But Iran has already priced that in. It won't work. Or they go military. A targeted strike cyber attack, special operations, airstrikes on enrichment facilities. Short, sharp, designed to set the program back 2 to 3 years. But Iran has hardened and buried its nuclear infrastructure precisely to survive such strikes and the retaliation against American forces against Israel. Against Gulf oil infrastructure would be immediate and catastrophic. The third option, a genuine diplomatic reset, has just been publicly destroyed by Tehran. You cannot unring that bell. Watch the next 72 hours. Watch whether the IAEA calls an emergency session. Watch whether Israel's defense minister makes a public statement. Watch whether the USS Truman's repositioning becomes publicly confirmed. Watch whether oil prices spike at tomorrow's market open. These are the real-time indicators. And right now, every single one of them is moving in the wrong direction. This is just the beginning of the most dangerous geopolitical sequence of 2026. And it is moving fast. So let's be honest about where we stand right now. The United States sent a negotiation offer to Iran. Iran read it, dissected it, named it as dishonest theater, and publicly threw it back in Washington's face in front of the entire world. That is not just a failed meeting. That is a statement of dominance from a nation that the U.S. has spent for decades trying to isolate, pressure, and contain. And here is the hardest truth of this moment. America came to this negotiation wanting a deal. Iran came to this negotiation wanting to end negotiations forever. One side got what it wanted. This is not just a diplomatic failure, this is a historic inflection point. The moment when the world's most powerful military found itself with no good options against a mid-sized nation that simply decided it was no longer afraid, that shift the fear leaving the room changes everything that follows. History does not move slowly. Sometimes it moves in 48 hours. We just watched it happen. Stay informed, stay watching. Because the next move from Washington, from Tehran, from Tel Aviv, from Moscow will come fast. And when it does, you'll want to understand exactly how we got here. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, because this story is not over. It is just getting started.